Hello, and welcome back to the Film Library, a Kanopy podcast. I'm Kristy Puchko, entertainment editor at Mashable.
And I'm Jeff Rauseo, film lover, documentary junkie, and proud champion of weird true stories and VHS oddities.
This week, we're diving into the world of documentaries, the bold, the bizarre, and the deeply personal. There are films that make you say, wait, did that really happen?
Kanopy's documentary library is full of these jaw-dropping stories, cult curiosities, and under-the-radar masterpieces. Whether you're into music history and rockumentaries, conspiracy theories, homegrown heroes, or internet-era archivists, there's something here to surprise you.
We're sharing some of our all-time favorites, films that made us laugh, gasp, question reality, or just immediately text a friend, you have to watch this.
So grab your headphones, pull up your watch list, and get ready for a wild ride through the stranger-than-fiction side of cinema. Now, Kristy, talking about documentaries, do you remember the first documentary that just completely blew your mind?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't remember watching documentaries much until I was in high school and college, and I forget where this one hit me, but I remember watching King of Kong, the Donkey Kong movie.
So good. That's one of my favorites.
Right? And it was it really got me into hobby docs in a big way because I like knowing why someone likes a thing, even if it is something that cool, I'm never going to do that. I love being exposed to that kind of enthusiasm and, getting to understand it, even if it's not for me personally. What about you?
Yeah, no, you just brought back big memories. That was probably the first documentary I'd ever seen.
I had very strong opinions about it. That, I don't remember his name now, the guy with the long hair and the furniture rental store.
Billy Mitchell.
Look at that.
I love this movie. I've been to, so obviously I live in New Hampshire. I've been to that arcade many, many times where they filmed all the championships. Yeah, incredible. So I'm a huge fan. That was probably the first one. I almost, when you said that, I was like, I think I remember my uncle got that DVD from Netflix. That's aging me, but that's where we first watched it, and it was awesome. But that probably did blow my mind. But I think the first one that really got me was I was in high school and I watched Freakonomics, and that I was like, whoa, the world is so crazy, and there's so and some of that stuff now watching it later, I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe it was a little exaggerated, but it really just blew my mind as a high school kid, because you think you just solved all the world's problems. You're like, I watched this documentary and I know how to fix everything now.
Right, statistics becomes the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, I was like, got it. I'm 14, 15, and I know how to fix the world because I watched this. So that one really blew my mind and got me into, I ended up taking business classes in college and watched more stuff like that, and got me really into that side of things for a while, the economics and the wild way that capitalism works. So very interesting, mind-opening for sure.
I love that. Well, this week we're trying to figure out what are the best things to watch on Kanopy. And the thing is, there's so many documentaries that this was hard to pick. So I like that our list is it's pretty I don't know, it's pretty all over the place, and I'm excited about it. But let's dive in with your first pick.
Yeah, this movie goes way back for me. I've got a whole story about it. But the film's called Raiders, the story of the greatest fan film ever made. And the basic premise of this is that it's a whole movie about a bunch of friends who grew up trying to recreate Raiders of the Lost Ark, just in their houses, in their backyard, shot for shot remake. They had no equipment, no training. They're I think they started when they were maybe pre-teen and went up until, through high school, through puberty and awkward friendships and relationships and all this stuff. And it's unbelievable what they actually created. And I remember I have this one uncle, Doug, if he's listening, shout out. He's my big film guy. And this movie was always kind of a folklore that this home video version even existed. I remember looking 10 years old on the internet, and he found clips of it. And he was like, look, these kids made Raiders. And it was 5 minutes of the movie. So when this came out, I was blown away, because I was I've been following this film.
It's your Lost Ark.
It really was. I've been following this for years, and the movie's so cool. I mean, they literally, first of all, what they do as kids is unbelievable. And I love the way that it takes you through all of that. It's a film about filmmaking, but it's really about a film that why do people love movies and the connections they have with movies. And, you know, these kids just connected with Raiders and so much that they were like, we need to do this on our own. And like the guys grow up and, you know, they don't necessarily end up like diving into this world. It's not like one of them became Steven Spielberg, but they always kind of carried this with them. And the coolest thing is the ending. They filmed everything, but they had one problem, was the airplane fight sequence with a big explosion. Like, how do you do that as a teenager? And so the documentary takes you to adulthood and basically picks up as they're finishing that final scene, like decades after they shot everything else. So they had this movie like 98% done, shot by shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and just couldn't blow up an airplane. But now they're adults and somebody wanted to make a documentary and they must have had some budget and they said, let's finish it. So it's really cool. It bounces back and forth between the old footage and the new stuff. And it talks about like the reunion, everybody coming back together. There's a lot of nostalgia for all of them, like getting back together as a group. But it's full of heart. If you love like pop culture, obviously if you love Raiders of the Lost Ark, you're going to love this. If you love Indiana Jones. But it's, you know, it's all about the process of making movies just for the love of it. And like, I think we've all been there. Like anybody who loves movies, I've done it. Like I did a shot for shot remake of Napoleon Dynamite when I was 13 and nobody's ever going to see that footage, but it does exist.
Don't never say never.
And I think everybody did this. You always want to just like take the camcorder and go out and like make a movie because you see something that connects with you. And like these kids just took it to the max, and it ends really beautifully with them getting to complete their version of Raiders, which is so cool.
I love that. My first pick is also about someone who is very committed to a personal project. It's a very different story, though. It's Marwencol from 2010. Have you seen this movie?
I saw it at a film festival, I think, way back when it came out. I have not seen it since.
Well, it's directed by Jeff Malmberg, and as you know, is about a guy named Mark Hogenkamp, who on April 8th of 2000 was violently assaulted outside of a bar. He puts it that the teenagers kicked his memories out of his head. He had to go through incredible physical therapy. He suffered damage to his brain. And when he came out the other side of that, how he learned to cope with how he felt about things was building a model town in his backyard. And he called it Marwencol, naming it after him and two of his friends. And in it, he built this like World War II Belgian camp where his avatar, essentially, which is a action figure he built, is like loving and losing and fighting Nazis. And he would act these things out, and more than just act them out, he would have these elaborate stories that he would photograph. And then he would take them around town and show his friends and be like, look, you're in my town. Like, I made a model of you, and this is what happens. And this is Deja Torres. She's a witch and a time traveler. And like, he created this incredible story that gave him a place to channel things like his rage about being attacked, like the parts of himself that he wasn't ready to accept yet. And he, by putting it into art, made it something creative instead of destructive. And he talks about it that he used to have a drinking problem. So he's really trying to find ways to channel his energy that help him. And also, like, it helps him with some of the hand-eye coordination stuff that he lost because of the attack. Yeah. So the film becomes about a guy who initially is just kind of a quirky guy in upstate New York. And like the people around him love him and understand him and embrace all of this like craftsmanship as part of how he expresses himself. And then a professional photographer sees him one day walking one of his vehicles down the side of the road, which he very specifically says he does because he doesn't like the toy tire tracks of the seam of the plastic. So it's like something he does for realistic elements. And they start talking, and then it's like he becomes the center of like a magazine article. He gets a show in New York where they show his photographs and they make a movie about him. And I looked, he had another gallery show this year. And it's such a beautiful story because it is a hobby doc, but it's also like a personal story about a man or a person who like uses art to heal himself. Mm-hmm. And this film is so incredibly vulnerable because he is expressing his innermost wishes through this medium that he understands people might make fun of. And he does it anyway, which is, I mean, it's a movie so much about hope and bravery. And one of my favorite parts is when he's debating what to wear to his art show, and when he finally wears the thing he wants to wear, it feels like such a huge victory. And I rewatched it today, and I'm just like, oh my God. But yeah, this was a movie that really knocked me out because I saw it being like, what does Marwencol mean? What, like, I had no idea. In 2010, like, I was not nearly as versed. Obviously, it was a while. It was some time ago. I was not nearly as well versed in film. I think I had just maybe started writing about film outside of school, you know, and like it really just knocked me out. And I just kept showing it to people and being like, you have to see this movie. And I wanted to have them experience it and to understand Mark, because I thought within Mark is such a incredible story of resilience and creativity. And it's like he didn't necessarily think of himself as an artist. This was just something he needed, that he was like channeling himself into. And as someone who crafts when I have feelings, I relate to that. But yeah, I think it's such a beautiful movie. And I just, watching it now, I'm still just very swept up in it and the story of it, and how the filmmaker really gives Mark the space to tell his story without judgment, and allows us to get to know him. And that feels like such a privilege.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If I was remembering correctly, it felt like we always talk about like character studies and like fictional stuff, but like this one's a true character study, and the directors don't really insert any of their own spin or commentary, or they just kind of let him be and let you just discover who he is and let him tell his story. And that's kind of refreshing, because I feel like so many documentaries I watch now are so like, there's such a spin, there's such an angle. It's nice to just like watch something about somebody doing what they love and just letting that breathe a little bit. So yeah, from what I remember, it's great. And I should probably rewatch it, because it has been a solid, if I started a film festival, it was like you said, 2010.
Yeah, right?
A solid 14, 15 years. So it's time to rewatch that.
Time flies. Wild stuff. Yeah, I Googled because I was like, what's he up to now? And it's like, he just had another gallery exhibit. I love that.
That's awesome. Well, my next one takes a little bit of a left turn. We had a couple of uplifting documentaries, and now I'm going to get a little weird on you. And if you've watched the past episodes, that shouldn't surprise anybody. But I picked 3 Identical Strangers, and this almost, if it wasn't one I was going to talk about, it would have been my pick for like the documentary that blew my mind when I first saw it, because this has so many twists and turns that when I was writing notes on like how to talk about this, I was very careful not to try and ruin any of it for anybody. So bear with me, but I'm going to tell you kind of the basics, and I really want people to like go into this knowing as little as possible. And I've watched a lot of documentaries. This is, and everybody always says that, like, this is truly one that like, you just need to know the base story and then let it go. But it came out in 2018. And it's got a really strong hook. So basically the setup is like in the early 80s, this college student arrives on campus and gets mistaken for somebody else. And he's like, oh, that's weird, but hey, who knows? We're all new here. Somebody thinks I look like someone else. He has some conversations, finds out he's got a twin brother who he's never met, who was adopted by a totally different family, and that's who he's getting mistaken for. So mind-blowing enough, I have a twin brother, not just a doppelganger, but a twin brother. Story hits the news, another guy sees the photos, and he goes, hey, that's also me. He's a third. They're actually triplets. So this is the 3 Identical Strangers. They were all adopted separately, raised in completely different households, and completely unaware that they existed until this chance kind of happening here on the college campus. So that's the whole jumping off point, which in and of itself, like, that would be a documentary.
Right. Like that alone is an episode of 60 Minutes.
Right. That is a wild story.
Or 2020.
Dateline. Yeah. Like you name it. And then it just goes into this, it starts so kind of feel good, and like there's funny moments and you're like laughing, you're like, this is so crazy, like imagine finding a twin and then a triplet,
and they're so joyful about meeting each other.
It's such a feel good like reunion, and they're on the news and they're all talking about it, and they become like these little minor celebrities for a little bit, like look at these 3 kids. But then it starts to dive into like deep stuff, nature versus nurture, you know, maybe these kids have signed up for something they didn't even know about. They didn't consent to. What's their identity? You know, it really stands out, and it changes tones. It starts to become almost like a thriller, and the pace completely changes when you have this kind of left turn, and there's no like flashiness or anything. Like, they just kind of let it build, and it, you know, you find one thing out and you're like, all right, that's gotta be it, and then it's like, on top of that, here's more, and they just kind of let it play out. But it just kind of like examines the way that sometimes like the media covers things too. Like, their public reunion was so charming, and it was this, you know, it was the story you'd see on the nightly news, and it was the feel good story, and like the film kind of exposes all that, pushes back on that a little bit. Like, what, this is more than a reunion. This is about, hey, what happens after this? Because there's joy here, but there's also trauma knowing that you had two identical siblings who lived their entire childhoods without knowing about you. And like, this is truly like, the truth is stranger than fiction. It gets into that territory. I'm beating around the bush a little bit and trying not to give anything away, but it's like, it really is like a mystery. Like, stuff is going to unfold as you watch this, and I would doubt anybody guesses where this goes after that opening hook. So don't read too much about it. Maybe just listen to what I said. Maybe don't even. Maybe stop and rewind and erase all that from your memory. Just go play it. Just let it surprise you, because this was like, boom, like seriously mind-blowing when I first saw it.
I get that. Yeah, I think it's a really strong documentary. It's really interesting, and yeah, one that definitely hits your brain and makes you kind of rattle. My next pick has nothing to do with yours, and yet it also like shook me up pretty hard. It's called Flipside. It's from 2023, and it is a movie that keeps changing what it is. But not in like what you're talking about. It's like, it's not a thriller. There's not twists and turns. It's about, it's from director Chris Wilcha, and he is a Gen Xer who set out to make films that were going to be like shaking up the status quo, and like, he wasn't going to be a sellout. He was going to make all this challenging cinema. And then he kind of all of a sudden realizes he's middle-aged. He is a commercial director, and he has a bunch of documentaries he never finished. And this like movie becomes him showing those documentaries while exploring the creative process. Like, here's a documentary I started about this amazing photographer who shot all these jazz musicians. And here's a documentary I started with Starlee Kine about a book she didn't finish. And here's the documentary I started. Like, there's all these like, oh, like he did a documentary about the movie Funny People with Judd Apatow. So like, Ira Glass is in this, Judd Apatow's in this, Starlee Kine, Uncle Floyd, who is a New Jersey icon. He talks about Flipside is named for a record store that he wanted to make a movie about this like record store that's kind of like on its last legs. But ultimately, it becomes all these people talking about the obstacles to creativity, essentially in a capitalist society where you have to make compromises. Like, what does that look like? And it's a movie that like, I saw it at a festival, and I was like enjoying it. I was enjoying the ride. I was like, where is this going to go? And all the interview footage he shows is really interesting. So you can totally see the seeds of these documentaries. And then it just keeps building. And all of a sudden, I'm kind of having a midlife crisis in the middle of this movie. Which like I'm quoted in the poll, like I might like my review is like quoted in the trailer, which they basically kind of ran with that. Like, oh yeah, this movie might freak you out pretty hard. I forget what the poll quote is, but it's something along the lines of like, yeah, I sort of had a midlife crisis in the middle, but it's fine. But I really love that about the movie, because it becomes this film about the challenges in having an artistic vocation. Like, what drives you, what scares you, and like what is getting in the way of you pursuing your dreams, and is those things worth the compromise of that? And I just really love it, because it's not I know how this sounds. It sounds navel-gazing. It sounds like a guy being like, I could have been great, and instead I did this. And that's not what it is. He's not mopey. He's just genuinely reflecting with more famous people than himself, which I think is helpful, because it kind of shows this is something we're all dealing with. We're all dealing with the self-doubt. We're all dealing with like, why didn't I finish this project? Why am I not as driven as I want to be? Why am I not accomplishing the things I want to accomplish? And it's like dealing with all of that in a way that is so empathetic and forgiving. So it becomes the tough conversation with yourself that maybe you can't have on your own, but this movie is like, you're not alone. Like, let's have that conversation together. At least let's recognize that it's a conversation some of us aren't having.
This movie's going to terrify me, I think.
Yeah,
I'm getting to that age and point now, and I still work my day job and just do all this stuff for fun. So I'm stuck in the 9 to 5, like corporate all day. And oh my God, if I don't question every day, like, why am I doing this and not like chasing something else? This movie's going to hit hard. I know I'm not alone. It's that midlife crisis, even though hopefully this isn't midlife yet. Maybe this is a
You're very mature for your age.
Hopefully I don't look as old as my midlife.
That's right. Like, I'm feeling this and I'm like, I know I'm older than you, but coolsies.
But man, just you talking about it already has me experiencing some of that existential crisis and like, what am I doing here? I should be doing art. I shouldn't just be making money for shareholders. Like, I feel that.
This is going to hit you. It's going to hit you. I don't mean that as a judgment. I think it's really interesting because I think
everybody goes through it, I think.
Right. Especially because like when you're in your 20s and you're so idealistic and you think like, I'm going to change the world and this and this and this, you also got to pay rent. And exactly. that's a real thing. So like, I think this film deals with that in such a humanistic way that doesn't judge that compromise. Like, it's one that most of us are going to have to make. And I love the way the film deals with it because it shook me up. But it's like, I like that, this movie wasn't some sort of like, but the art I found along the way, or but my children, or like, it didn't give me an easy out. It really made me kind of have to sit with his decisions and then reflect on my own. Yeah,
no, it wasn't I could have been somebody. It wasn't one of those.
Right. There's not like a clear path of like, oh, I definitely made the right decisions. I definitely made the wrong decisions. And I like that about it.
That's life, right? There is no clear path. And I'll tell you, my next pick, this guy did not have a clear path either. So let me tell you all about this.
Is that a sports joke? I don't know sports. I'm really excited to learn.
It's not a sports joke. No, it's not. It wasn't a sports joke. This is it. The guy really did have like a tough life. It was an up and down life. But this one that I picked, it is a sports documentary, but it's a lot deeper than that. It's called No, a documentary, DOCK, because it is the story of Doc, DOCK Ellis, who was a Major League Baseball pitcher, and his famous claim to fame is that he threw a no-hitter, which is, for non-sports fans, one of the most impressive things you can do as a baseball pitcher. He went the whole game, nobody got a hit off him. And he did it while he was on LSD. So...
Wait. Okay, so again, not a sports person. Is LSD a performance-enhancing drug?
I would not consider it to be one. I haven't tried to pitch while on it. But as a former pitcher myself, I can't imagine seeing 3 or 4 catcher's mitts would be very helpful. Or whatever was going through his mind in that experience. So it's a little bit of baseball folklore. I say he famously claimed that this happened because I think he was also on a few different things, and this was the 70s, and it was baseball, and a lot of guys were on a lot of different things. There were amphetamines running through those clubhouses. I bet they didn't even know what they were taking half the time.
I like it was the 70s and baseball. I feel like that's a really good, you get it.
It is, there was a lot going on. But this is his story, and so like that right there, again, kind of like 3 Identical Strangers, like that's a hook. Tell me about the guy who was high on LSD and threw a no-hitter. But it goes like beyond just this little like baseball footnote and folklore into like a real character study of Doc Ellis and like the times and the kind of counterculture and what he was dealing with. Like at this time, baseball's still kind of navigating the whole race thing. And he's, Doc Ellis is a black man, like he's navigating through that in the 70s. And, sure, he's pitching on acid, but like he's also like rebelling, and he was like famous for, he wore curlers in his hair on the field, and like protested racism, and he was kind of this, they would have labeled him unpredictable, but he was kind of rebelling against the culture of what baseball had always been and what it still can be sometimes, which is very prim and proper. And you think of like the Yankees and like don't have facial hair and like everything, there's all these traditions, and people get upset about anybody that's too big.
That's interesting. So I, again, don't know sports, but I love the way you're describing this, because as someone who has a lot of energy and a lot of flair as a person, I grew up in a Catholic school where uniforms were very in. So you're like, no facial hair. I'm like, I remember all these rules. This sounds really exciting to me. This is what I'm talking about. We were talking before about like docs were like, I don't know anything about it, but like, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
I want to know everything about it.
You definitely don't need to know baseball, or like, even like, you don't need to be like a baseball fan, because this goes way beyond it. And it also has like a ton of really cool animations. They kind of mix, like, there's archival footage, there's interviews, but then there's
where there's gaps,
because like, how do you visualize somebody pitching on acid? So like, they give you these kind of trippy like animated sequences, so it's like super creative. It's really cool, and it is this whole story of just like personal growth and public image. It gets into addiction and recovery. I mean, it just keeps pulling you in. It's really character driven. Tons of funny moments, tons of like, I can't believe this is real, but like there's this sadness and emotion to it too. So like, it really is this full story that just kind of came from this, I guess what we'd consider like a viral moment now, of like, this dude just pitched a no-hitter high on acid. And it dives a lot deeper into him and that time period and what was going on in baseball and the country and like, it covers all of it. So a great hook that really does open it up into something even richer.
I love that. Added it to my queue right now. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think you'll like it.
I actually have a tie-in to this. I didn't think we would, but hear me out. Baseball stadium is where I went to the American Idiot tour.
There you go.
There we are.
Yeah,
My
I'm
next pick
jealous.
is it was very cool. My next pick is Green Day, 20 Years of American Idiot. It came out in 2024, time to the 25th anniversary of American Idiot, an album that I was obsessed with. And last summer, I got to see Green Day play, and that was really cathartic on a couple of fronts, including that when they toured with the album initially, I did not have the kind of money to get into that concert, like, at all. But the nosebleed seats at, I don't know, this is where it gets embarrassing, the baseball stadium in Queens, that one, an amazing show. Like, it was 5 hours long. It opened with the Linda Lindas, then it was Rancid, then it was Smashing Pumpkins, then it was Green Day. It was like a Monday night. It was incredible. And this documentary is so cool because it's like about this tour, about the anniversary. It has footage from them back in the day when the album came out. It has them talking about why American Idiot got made, including the fact that they wrote a totally different album. I think it was called Valentines and Cigarettes, that got stolen. Like, the drives went missing. And they were
Kidding.
I guess we can try to recreate this thing from scratch or just do something else. And Billy was like, I'm going to do something else. Billy Joe Armstrong's like, let's do something else. And so he and Mike Dirnt and Trey Cool like got together. They made this album that we're all obsessed with. And like, the tour is so cool because they're showing this footage of like them back in the day and like, they're the same guys, which is like, that's what I experienced at that show was there's something interesting to me about the fact that like who I was in my 20s couldn't have predicted who I am in my 40s. And I really feel good about that because I am a different person, but I'm not irrecognizable to the person I was. Like, the things that mattered to me then matter to me now. And, I saw that reflected at the concert. I see that reflected in this movie. And I love this record. So like, and like hearing it live was incredible. So like watching the documentary where you're watching footage of them playing it live was amazing. And then also just watching them having to explain to people like what their deal is so funny because they are a band who took their music seriously, but not themselves seriously. And so like, it's just such a joy. Like, I love that attitude. I don't often sit around going, you know how I'm like Green Day? But now that I'm thinking about it, that is how I'm like Green Day. I take my work seriously, but I refuse to take I refuse to take myself seriously. This is who I am. But like, yeah, this documentary, like, there's so many great documentaries on Kanopy that it was like I wanted to pick something, and it was actually very hard to pick because there's so many exciting ones. Like when we were going over this, my initial list was like 20 long, and I was like, but yeah, man, Green Day, like it's the time of year to rock out and reflect on the music that built you and what it means then and what it means now. And this documentary manages all of that. So props to directors Bill Berg-Hillinger and Chris Dugan, because this rocks.
Yeah, I did not know that this came out, and I need to see it because I think that came out when I distinctly remember marking it. It was the 6th grade. I think it was the first CD I ever bought. My mom made me buy the clean version, which sucked. But
wait, I do need to know what's like an example of the clean version.
Well, everything's just it basically just take out all the swear words, right?
Sure.
It's just sanitized down, and they don't really replace them either, from what I remember. There's just
a blank.
They just cut them. So it wasn't the best experience. I got my hands on a real version eventually. Yeah, those guys totally formed. Like, that was the biggest musical thing of middle school for me, and I'm so jealous you get to see them, because I've tried twice now and failed. The first time, COVID canceled it.
Oh.
And I was going to see them at Fenway. I was going to see them at baseball stadium. And then last year they also came, and we couldn't go to that date. So I saw Blink-182 at Fenway instead, which was cool. But I need to see Green Day. Boy, how do I transition into this next one? That's going to be my transition, is how do I transition into Room 237? Let me just tell you about Room 237. So if you haven't seen Room 237, I think it's probably one of the craziest and most fascinating documentaries about a movie that's ever been made. And the whole thing is about The Shining, but it's not just hey, how did Stanley Kubrick make The Shining? It's like this discussion from people who have spent literal decades obsessing over every frame of that movie and all the theories that came from it. And that's what it's all. It's all a series of these audio interviews with fans and theorists, and we never see any of them on screen, which is kind of different and cool. It's all just collages of movie clips, not just from The Shining, but from all sorts of unrelated films. So it's really unconventional, but the claims that people make in this are and you're honestly I think I know what The Shining's about. Not after you watch this movie, because some people say it's about genocide of Native Americans, and someone says it's about the Holocaust, and someone else said it's Kubrick's confession that he did fake the moon landing. And Rodney Asher's the director. I actually got to meet him, talk to him for a little bit when I was out in LA. He is still obsessed about this movie, and I love that. We were talking about The Shining. This is 13 years after this movie came out, and you can just see this was his baby. He was I'm just going to interview all these people and just let it play out. I'll let you guys, make what you want of this, but it is all just interpretation. It's a whole movie of just interpretation at the deepest levels of film. You think yeah, you've read a book about a movie. No, Room 237 is, we're going to talk to everybody from someone who's got some scholarly, I think I know what this is about, to it's about the moon landing being faked and full on conspiracy theory. So it's a ton of fun. And it was the one on this list that we both
had highlighted. So we're we got to get into it.
Immediately, yeah, I saw that and I was I literally just watched it again. I came home from LA and I was well, I need to watch this again, because we were just talking about The Shining, and he had so many cool stories that weren't even in the documentary. So it kind of opened my eyes a little bit to the person behind it, which made me appreciate it even more and kind of see what he was going for. But yeah, I know you picked it too. So what's your experience with Room 237?
Yeah, I first saw it when it played at the New York Film Festival for a press screening, which that is a discerning room. And so it was really funny to watch it there, because I think what is so cool about the documentary is it's we talked about Marwencol. The director is not judging anybody's take on anything. He's presenting it. He is letting you have the space to make of it what you will. And I like watching it because I feel parts of it, I'm okay, I can see that. And some of the arguments, I'm that feels like a stretch. I don't. Right. But what I like about it is that it kind of confronts the idea that once a movie is out there, it does not belong to the filmmaker anymore. It belongs to us. It belongs to all of us. And everybody in that room, I think, had to feel a little uncomfortable because I think at a certain point, if you're judging someone's theory, you kind of have to point your finger back at yourself and go, well, what makes me think I'm right?
Right.
And I like that attitude about it. I like that film is just like, it's so wild because there are people saying things like, well, it's this and this and this and this. But then I think about like when I was in film school and passionately, making my argument about what this movie was about or that movie was about, and having a film professor just stare me down like,
yeah.
So like I enjoy that about it a great deal. And I think it's such a gorgeously cinematic way to explore this movie that I'd like to think Kubrick would like it. I don't, my awareness of Kubrick is through his movies. And recently, for prepping for this episode, I did watch Kubrick on Kubrick, which is on Kanopy, which gives some good insight into like how he looked at his process. It does not answer whether or not he faked the moon landing, though. So I guess for that, you got to go to Room 237 and see their arguments. But no, like, I think this is such a cool movie because movies about movies can be such a tricky terrain. I don't want a movie about movies that is stiff and is just lecturing at me. I like a movie that embraces the medium to explore what it has to say. And I think Room 237 does that beautifully.
Yeah, it's as a guy who's watched a lot of behind the scenes special features on Blu-ray discs, when I was doing reviews of those, so much of that stuff can be so boring. It becomes like, not in a bad way, but it's like film school discussions of like, this movie truly goes down like that YouTube like rabbit hole. Like in which like when he made this 2012, like wasn't nearly what it is today with like all the different, every movie now has a insert movie explained with, a million theories about it. That was like before all this, where people just having these conversations like in the lobby of the movie theater and like, here's what I think, man. What do you think? But you're right. It's like, it's cool that it doesn't invalidate anybody because like who's to say? It's whatever a movie means to you. Like if that's what you think the movie's about. I have some of those movies. I've talked about them. I'm like, I think Jaws is all about like capitalism, and like I have a whole theory on this that like you'd be like, it's actually about a shark, and I'm like, no, totally. Like I think everybody has that. So
no, I did an interview recently where I was explaining to someone that I was like, who has seen Jaws but not recently, and I was like, no, but the villain in Jaws is the mayor.
It's the mayor, yes, and he's letting people die for money so that the town like it's about the dangers of cat. See, exactly,
100%. We're on the same page.
But like that,
the shark was just being a shark.
Right. And it's like that, so Room 237 is that to the max. It's like watching The Shining on acid, which isn't as great as throwing.
It's like pitching a no-hitter on acid. I love this.
It's not quite as impressive, but it feels kind of the same way.
It's not quite as shocking as finding out you have two secret twins, but it's up there.
It's up there.
Well, I think that's a wrap on the Film Library, a Kanopy podcast. Whether you're into true crime, lost media, or deep cut music vids, we hope we've given you a few new rabbit holes to fall into.
We'll include all our documentary picks in the show notes and on Kanopy's Letterboxd HQ account. And if you haven't already, head over to Kanopy.com to discover your next favorite true story. Everything's streaming free with your library card or university login.
Subscribe to the Film Library to keep up with new episodes. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a review or share the podcast with the most curious person you know. We release new episodes twice a month, highlighting standout titles from Kanopy's ever-growing collection.
You can follow us and Kanopy over on social media. I'm Jeff Rauseo, and you can find me on Letterboxd and most social media platforms by searching my name. That's JEFFRAUSEO.
And I'm the Kristy Puchko on Instagram, but just Kristy Puchko on Blue Sky and Letterboxd. That's KRISTYPUCHKO.
So until next time, just remember, not every documentary has the answers. Some just open the door.